11 years later, the dog finally found his owner. What happened next will shock you. The narrow street was quiet except for the occasional rustling of leaves in the chilly breeze. A lone stray dog stood at the edge of the sidewalk, his fur tangled and his body thin from years of struggle. His amber eyes, filled with something indescribable, were locked onto a man standing just a few feet away. The man, dressed in a worn-out brown coat, had only just stepped out of a small grocery store when he noticed the dog staring at him. At first, he thought nothing of it, just another stray, like so many in the city, but something made him pause. The dog wasn't just looking at him. He was frozen, unmoving, as if he had seen a ghost. A strange feeling crawled up the man's spine. Why did this dog feel so familiar? For a long moment, they stared at each other, locked in a silent exchange that neither could understand. Then, just as the man took a step forward, the dog's fur bristled. His lips curled back slightly. A deep, low growl rumbled from his throat. The man froze in his tracks. His heart pounded. Why was the dog growling at him? If this was just a stray, why did his presence make the man's chest tighten with something almost like recognition? Something was wrong, very wrong. 11 years ago, this dog wasn't just another stray wandering the streets. He had a home, he had a name, and most importantly, he had a person who loved him more than anything in the world. Daniel and his golden-furred companion Max were inseparable. From morning walks in the park to lazy afternoons on the porch, they were each other's shadow. Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. He was there during Daniel's happiest moments and comforted him during the hardest ones. Whenever Daniel came home from work, Max would be waiting at the door, wagging his tail so hard that his whole body wiggled with excitement. Their bond was something that couldn't be put into words. It was felt deeply in every shared glance, every wag, every joyful bark. But then, one fateful evening changed everything. It was a chilly autumn night when Daniel took Max out for his usual evening walk. The streets were quiet, the air filled with the scent of damp leaves. Everything seemed normal, until a sudden noise shattered the peace. A loud crash, a car door slamming, the startled bark of a dog. Daniel's heart jumped. He turned in an instant, but before he could react, Max was already running. The leash had slipped from his fingers. His best friend, his loyal companion, was bolting into the darkness, disappearing down the street at full speed. "Max, no, stop!" Daniel's voice echoed through the night, but the dog didn't turn back. Panic surged through him, and he ran after Max, his lungs burning as he sprinted down the street, his eyes darting in every direction. But the more he searched, the emptier the streets became. Max was gone. Daniel refused to believe it. He spent the entire night searching, calling out Max's name over and over until his voice was hoarse. He scoured every alley, every park, every familiar spot, thinking that any moment now, Max would come trotting back, tail wagging like nothing had happened. But dawn arrived, and Max was nowhere to be found. Desperation took over. Posters were printed and plastered on every street corner. Daniel visited every shelter, asking the same question over and over. "Have you seen this dog?" Days turned into weeks. Each morning, Daniel woke up hoping for a phone call, someone telling him they had found Max, that his nightmare was finally over. But the calls never came. Hope turned into exhaustion. The search became a painful routine, an obsession that only left him feeling more empty with each passing day. And then, one day, he had to face the truth. Max was gone. Just like that, without a goodbye, without a trace. The best friend who had been by his side through everything had vanished. Daniel was forced to accept what he never wanted to believe. He might never see Max again. Time had done its work, washing away the sharp edges of Daniel's grief. 11 years. It felt like a lifetime. The seasons had changed, his hair had started graying at the temples, and the world had moved on. But deep inside, the pain of losing Max never fully faded. Some wounds never truly heal, and some memories never let go. Daniel had long stopped searching. He had accepted that some things in life remain unanswered. And yet, fate had other plans. It was a regular afternoon, nothing out of the ordinary. The sky hung heavy with thick gray clouds, the air crisp with the scent of impending rain. Daniel was walking down a quiet street after running some errands when he passed by an old, worn-down animal shelter. He had walked this path countless times before, never paying much attention. But today, something made him stop. A strange feeling tugged at him, an odd pull he couldn't explain. His eyes drifted toward the chain-link fence lined with kennels, each housing dogs of different breeds, and conditions. Some barked at passers-by, others whined, pressing their noses against the bars, longing for attention. But then he saw him. In the farthest corner, partially hidden in the shadows, sat an old, frail-looking dog. His fur, once golden, was now faded with streaks of silver. His body was lean, marked by time and hardship. But it wasn't the day's worn appearance that made Daniel's heart stop. It was the eyes. Deep, familiar amber eyes locked onto him. Unblinking, unmoving. The moment their gazes met, the world seemed to shrink. Daniel inhaled sharply, his breath caught in his throat. A strange electric tension filled the air. The dog didn't bark, didn't whimper, didn't wag his tail. He just stared. Daniel took a step closer, his heart pounding in his chest. But before he could get too near, the teeth flinched, ever so slightly. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Daniel saw it, the slight recoil, the cautious, weary glance. A mixture of emotions swirled in the dog's amber eyes. Confusion, hesitation, something almost like recognition. Daniel's pulse quickened. His mind raced, battling against the impossible thought creeping in. No, it couldn't be, could it? He swallowed hard, barely aware of his own voice as he whispered, "Max?" The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't move. He didn't come running. He just stood there, silent, stiff, his body tense as if torn between instinct and something else, something buried deep in memory. Daniel's chest tightened. Was this truly Max, his best friend, lost to time? Or was he just seeing what his heart so desperately wanted to believe? Daniel's breath hitched. His knees felt weak as he stayed crouched, his eyes locked onto the old dog before him. Why wasn't Max reacting? He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, how it would feel to finally see his best friend again. He pictured Max's ears perking up, his tail wagging uncontrollably, the way he'd leap forward, unable to contain his excitement. But this wasn't right. Daniel extended his hand slightly, his fingers trembling. "It's me, buddy," he murmured, his voice soft, almost pleading. "It's me, don't you remember?" The dog's ears twitched, but there was no spark of recognition in his eyes. No eager movement, no warmth. Instead, his muscles tensed even more. His tail, once a happy flag that wagged at even the slightest attention, remained low and stiff. Daniel swallowed hard. The dog's amber eyes flickered with something unfamiliar. Not just confusion, but fear. Then a soft, warning growl. Daniel froze. It was low, almost hesitant, but unmistakable. A sound that sent a shiver crawling up his spine. Max was growling at him. The man's heart pounded so loudly that it roared in his ears. He sat there, stunned, his hands still outstretched in desperate hope. Bystanders had begun to notice. A few shelter workers near the entrance exchanged puzzled looks. A couple passing by slowed their steps, whispering. A woman's voice cut through the murmurs. "If that's his dog, why does he look so scared?" The words stung. Daniel clenched his jaw, his mind racing. Why was Max acting like this? Was it the years apart? Had time worn away the bond they once shared? Or was it something else? He tried again, keeping his voice steady despite the knot forming in his chest. "Max, it's okay, boy. I'm here." But the dog didn't move. Instead, his body tensed even more. His ears flicked back slightly, subtle but a clear sign of unease. And then, another growl. This time a little deeper, a little more certain. The onlookers gasped softly. Daniel's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. This wasn't a lost dog recognizing his owner. This was something different, something broken. And for the first time, an unbearable thought crept into Daniel's mind. What if Max didn't remember him at all? The world around them felt still. The distant hum of the city, the occasional bark from the other dogs in the shelter. It all faded into the background. Daniel remained kneeling, his breath shallow, his heart hammering in his chest. Why? Why wasn't Max reacting the way he should? He could feel the weight of the onlookers' stares. The murmurs around him grew louder. Maybe it's not his dog. That poor thing looks terrified. How sad, and the dog doesn't even recognize him. Daniel clenched his jaw, his eyes burning with unshed tears. No, this was Max. It had to be. Then a thought struck him. Maybe it was him who looked different. 11 years had passed. He was older now. His face had changed. Wrinkles creased his forehead. Streaks of gray ran through his hair. And today, with the cold wind nipping at his face, he had come bundled up, a thick hat pulled low and dark sunglasses shielding his eyes. What if Max couldn't see the man he once knew? Slowly, with shaking fingers, Daniel reached up. First, he pulled off his hat, ruffling his hair as he let the cool air hit his skin. Then he hesitated. His pulse pounded as he reached for his sunglasses. He pulled them off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Max blinked. His head tilted slightly, his ears twitching as he stared harder at Daniel's face. Daniel held his breath. Was it working? Then, the dog's eyes widened. It was barely noticeable at first, just a flicker, a small shift in expression. But then his entire body stiffened. Not with fear, but with something else. Recognition. Max's eyes darted frantically over Daniel's face, his ears perking up. His tail gave a hesitant flick, and then a tiny whimper. Daniel's chest tightened. His lip quivered as the first tear slipped down his cheek. Max, it's me, buddy, he whispered, voice breaking. I never stopped looking for you. That was all it took. Max let out a sharp, desperate cry. Then suddenly he bolted. Like a flash of golden lightning, he launched forward, his entire body trembling with excitement. His tail wagged so fast it was a blur. He crashed into Daniel's chest, his paws clawing at his shirt as if trying to climb into his arms. Whimpering, whining, crying. Daniel barely had time to react before he was knocked back onto the ground. Max's wet nose buried into his neck, his tongue lapping at his face in frantic, desperate kisses. Daniel let out a choked laugh, tears streaming freely now. He wrapped his arms around his best friend, holding him tight as Max wiggled and squirmed, unable to contain his joy. The crowd around them gasped. Oh my God, it really is him. A wave of emotion swept through the onlookers. Some clapped, others wiped away tears of their own. Even the shelter workers, who had seen countless reunions, stood frozen, watching one of the most beautiful moments unfold before them. Max pressed his head against Daniel's chest, letting out a soft, happy whine. After 11 years, after thousands of lonely nights, after believing he was gone forever, Max had finally come home. Daniel cradled Max in his arms, his heart racing with overwhelming joy. This was real. After all these years, after so much heartbreak, his best friend was here, licking his face, wagging his tail like he was a puppy again. But deep inside, a tiny voice whispered, what if this was all just excitement? What if it was just the energy of the moment? He had to be sure. Daniel gently pulled back, cupping Max's furry face in his hands. The dog's tongue still flicked out, his whole body vibrating with happiness. His amber eyes, once filled with doubt, now gleamed with something else. Love. The crowd had grown silent again, watching. They had seen the emotional reunion, but some still wondered. Could this really be his dog? Daniel knew exactly what to do. He took a slow, steady breath. Then, in a voice only Max would recognize, he whispered, paw up. For a second, just one heartbeat, Max froze. His ears twitched. His tail stopped wagging. And then he lifted his paw. Not just any paw, his right paw, the same one he had been trained to raise since he was a puppy. The crowd gasped. A few people clapped their hands over their mouths. Someone whispered, no way, it's really him. But Daniel wasn't done. A tear slipped down his cheek as he gave another command, this time even softer. Turn, Max. Without hesitation, Max spun in a perfect little circle. Just like he used to, Daniel let out a shaky laugh. His chest felt like it might burst. He never forgot, Daniel murmured, his voice breaking. He ran his fingers through Max's fur, his eyes glistening. Even after all this time. Max let out a soft whine and nuzzled against his chest, pressing as close as he could. The shelter workers, the bystanders, everyone watching was moved beyond words. There was no more doubt. This wasn't just a lucky guess. This wasn't just a hopeful reunion. This was fate. Daniel had found his best friend again. And Max had never forgotten. Max refused to let go, even as Daniel held him tight, even as his arms ached from hugging his best friend so fiercely. Max only pressed closer. His paws gripped Daniel's shirt, his wet nose buried deep in his chest, as if he was afraid to let go, as if he believed that if he did, Daniel might disappear again. Daniel stroked his fur, his hands trembling. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought I lost you forever, buddy, but you never stopped waiting for me." Max let out a soft whimper and licked away the tear that rolled down Daniel's cheek. The shelter workers wiped their own eyes. A few people in the crowd sniffled, overwhelmed by what they had just witnessed. 11 years. 11 years apart, and yet nothing had changed. Daniel looked into Max's eyes, his voice thick with emotion. "This proves one thing, love never fades, no matter how many years pass." The crowd fell silent. Some nodded, others simply stood there, hands over their hearts. And then, the unexpected happened. Someone in the crowd pulled out their phone, then another, and another. They weren't just watching anymore. They were sharing it. A woman murmured, "People need to see this." Another whispered, "This is a real miracle." As Daniel held Max close, unaware of the cameras capturing this beautiful moment, a message began to spread. If you believe in miracles, share this story. And just like that, Max's story was no longer just theirs. It was a message of hope, one the world needed to hear.